welcome to the brand new edition of To The Point. I'm Kriti Mishra. And on today's show, I have with me CEO of NITI Aayog, Mr. Amitabh Kant. Mr. Kant, welcome to Rajya Sabha Television.
Great pleasure.
Sir, you head the Empowered Group on coordinating with private sector in this era of COVID-19 pandemic and also upping the response related to this pandemic. How have you stepped up the fight against COVID-19?
I think several things were done. One of the key things was that we used a vast network of our non-governmental organizations in the civil society. 92,000 NGOs were involved in this exercise across districts. Wherever we could feed them workers, we have fed. Any person who was left hungry or destitute, the entire network of civil society was mobilized throughout the country during this period. In addition to this, we mobilized a lot of our international organizations, the UN organizations, all of them, and we have separately taken feedback from the private sector. A lot of startups have done some unique work relating to ventilators, relating to masks, relating to PPEs, manufacturing. A huge amount of unique initiatives have been done, and the private sector, all associations of the private sector plus individual private sector has done some unique work and technological breakthrough. In fact, many of them are working with us to see what the post-COVID world will be and how we can use technology to leapfrog in the post-COVID world as well.
Absolutely, sir. We'll just get into the specifics of the activities being done by the Empowered Group you head. But before that, let's talk about the economic package that the government has announced. Now, India's economic stimulus value of 20 lakh crore is higher than the GDP of many countries. Your thought on the package cushioning the economy reeling under the impact of COVID-19?
So these are very challenging times, and I thought the package was extremely well thought out. It was extremely well crafted. It was very fiscally prudent as well as very fiscally efficient. And I think it, more than anything else, it's a package which accompanies a lot of structural reforms across coal, mine, agriculture. These were reforms which were pending for a very, very long time in the country. And what it demonstrates is the political will of the government, the administrative determination to actually take India to a high trajectory growth path over the next 3 to 4 decades. India was crying out for these reforms for a very long time. And, even to say that there will be public sector will be there only in strategic sectors, other area will get disinvested. Look at the amount of mineral imports we do, over about 5 lakh crores. We do, despite having vast resources of coal, we do imports of 1,70,000 crores. Now, pushing these forwards and pushing a huge emphasis on, major agricultural reforms, contract farming, Essential Commodities Act, APMC Act, the Agriculture Produce Marketing Committee Act. All this would mean that there will be increased production, productivity, greater earnings for our farmers, and the middlemen will get reduced. So these are huge, huge reforms to my mind in the country. The reforms in terms of the sector, in terms of their depth, in terms of their wide-ranging nature are far more than the reforms that were carried out in 1991, which were essentially a reform for delicensing of the industry sector. But these are big-ticket reforms.
You've always corroborated the idea of private sector coming out and also investing now that a vast arena has been opened for the private sector. In the recent past, we've seen the muted investment by the private sector. That has remained a cause of concern. How do you see things change now?
I think things will radically change because you'll suddenly have 6 airports being put out for bidding. You'll see again private sector bidding. You will see 50 huge coal mines being put out, coal blocks being put out. You will see about 500 mineral blocks being put out. Now, all these will attract private sector, and they will in turn get credit from financial institutions. So this whole cycle of credit, risk averseness for lending. So you'll have relevant projects coming out into the open. And along with that, you'll have private sector bidding for them in a transparent, competitive manner. They will in turn raise capital, and that's how India will grow in due course. We will get over the risk averseness. We need to get out of the fear of this pandemic. And I think, to my mind, the biggest stimulus that is really happening right now is the opening up of more and more activities for economic purposes in most of our cities and towns. And as that happens, accompanied with this package, will be a big, big step forward on taking India back onto the growth path.
That statement of yours will certainly encourage the private sector. But Mr. Kant, Prime Minister Modi has exhorted India to go vocal for local. It received collective appreciation and acceptance as well. But how difficult is it to achieve vocal for local?
Yeah, the Prime Minister also talked about vocal for local, and he talked about going global. So what the Prime Minister is talking about is not anti-globalization. He's not talking about protectionism. He's not talking about isolation. He is saying that India must use the strength of its domestic market to produce and manufacture in the domestic market, use its strength, and then use that as a springboard for export and penetrate global markets. All countries which have grown post-World War II have grown on the back of exports. So while we must capture domestic markets, we must look at the large market which the world provides, and we must be an integral part of the global supply chain. Also, it's very important that we must create Indian brands in the global market. Unlike many other countries, we've not put our global brands, and we need to create vast number of global brands from India. Also, we need to get into new areas of industry like electric mobility, battery manufacturing. We need to get into genomics. We need to get into a whole range of new areas of growth, which will actually be technology driven in the days to come. It'll be all technology which will drive India's growth in the future. And I think we must use technology to leapfrog. We must use artificial intelligence. We must use 5G. All these are areas which will enable India to drive at a massive rate forward.
So basically, the idea that you're propagating is think global and make local.
Yeah, absolutely. All Indians must think global. That's the way. Because we must understand that the global markets actually give you 5x of what you get in the domestic market. No country in the world post-World War II, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, China, has grown without penetrating global markets. And therefore, while there may be talk of protectionism, India's exports in the global markets still very small, 1.5%. And therefore, we must penetrate global markets.
But Mr. Kant, pandemics and economics, they don't mix well, they don't gel well. Supply chains have been massively disrupted. Now, the production will also depend how quickly we manage or settle the availability of laborers.
Yeah, so I'm a strong believer in the fact that migrant laborers have gone back. They were desperate to go back in the midst of this pandemic. They've gone back, but many have started coming back. Actually, there's a reverse flow also started happening now. And as industries open up, because what would they do in cities without work? They were here to earn. And therefore, as factories open up, as more and more companies open up, they will provide a greater incentive for workers to come back, and most of them will come back. And you'll have a thriving, growing, prospering India again.
Okay, moving on, the government has also amended the FDI policy to curb opportunistic acquisition of Indian companies. We saw China's resistance too. How important was this move to uphold indigenous interests?
So I think first and foremost, it's important to say that we should have a predictable and consistent policy, and India's policy has been full of predictability. Our foreign direct investment has grown quite enormously. Over the years, in the last 4 years, our FDI has grown by about 60% at a point of time when FDI across the world has fallen by 13%. So we have a very open, transparent policy. All that the government has done is that during this time, the values of our companies have fallen, and there should be no opportunistic takeover from some of the neighboring countries. That's all that it has done. We welcome investments from all over. We welcome investments from China as well. They should go into the right sectors. They invest in startups. They invest in infrastructure. If those investments were to come in road and infrastructure, all these areas are welcome. It's the policy doesn't talk about any country. It doesn't name any nation. And therefore, we are open to investments from all over the world.
And what kind of role of private sector do you foresee in the health infrastructure particularly?
So I think it's very important that the private sector plays a very key role in India in the health sector. But there are certain things which the government alone will be able to do, like the primary health care. Primary health care should be totally driven by the government. But in a range of areas like hospitals, etc., over the years, our investments have been low and private sectors played a very key role. But I think what this COVID-19 crisis has shown that India investment in health and education must improve. We must become totally focused as far as health infrastructure is concerned. We must create better infrastructure. And even there is a huge need to create many more doctors, many more nurses, young doctors. And we need to open out. And I think one of the good policy regimes of the government has been that we need to bring in many more medical colleges at the district level, along with the hospitals. And therefore, state hospitals, district hospitals, along with that, link up private medical colleges, and therefore open up this sector to many more medical colleges where we can create large number of new doctors in India. That is the intention. And therefore, we will continue to work on private-public partnership in the health sector. The new scheme for viability gap funding provides 30% enhancement. An outlay of 8,100 crores has been provided. I think most of it, to my mind, should go into education and health in the social sector. And we should drive this movement forward. But there are certain essentials. I'm a long-term believer that primary health care is essentially the job of the government. And if we are able to manage our primary health care well, we will do ourselves a lot of good in the coming years.
Mr. Kant, you've always been at the forefront of supporting the startups. We've seen several solutions being given by the startups in this era of COVID-19 pandemic. The role in future of the startups in evolving economy.
So the startups have done some amazing job during this period, including manufacturing ventilators. There's a startup called Aqua, which has done very well. There's another startup called Scanray, which has partnered India, Bharat Electronics to make ventilators in India. There are many, many startups who've done amazing work. With us in the government, we have many startups who have worked with us on amazing work on Arogya Setu. Arogya Setu is a product of our partnership with the startups. And they have, in fact, helped us to launch this. And we've had over 100 million downloads during this period. And in the coming months, you'll see many, many of these startups working with us on the health sector, including the Arogya Setu Mitra, where we've launched the telemedicine guidelines and taken the telemedicine sector forward, is a product of private sector. So there's a huge energy, vitality, and dynamism in our private sector movement, in our startups, and we need to tap this across many areas, across digital payments, across manufacturing, across financial inclusion, across health, across education, to enable India to make a big jump forward in the days to come.
Mr. Kant, since you've mentioned Arogya Setu app, let me take this opportunity and ask you, how do you choose to allay or assuage the concerns regarding Arogya Setu app?
So our main concern as we were innovating and evolving the Arogya Setu app was to ensure that it's a privacy first app. That first and foremost, we must take care of the privacy of the people. And therefore, the data on this is totally anonymized. You are given an independent ID. That ID is valid for 30 days on the mobile. Your data is kept only on the mobile. It goes to the server for 45 days and then it goes away. Only for people at risk. Only for people at risk, the data is there for 60 days. And therefore, it's totally anonymized and it's one of the highest levels of privacy. You don't have to worry about privacy concerns at all. It is by design a privacy first app.
Absolutely. So privacy is of paramount concern. But moving on, Mr. Kant, we are amid the biggest disruption that we've seen possibly in recent past or probably in our lifetimes. How will the work culture change particularly?
Or the work culture will change enormously. My view is that people will be given outcomes and outputs, and most of that will have to be uh, executed from wherever you are, need not necessarily be from home. You can do it anywhere. You will be assessed on your performance for delivery of outcomes. And therefore, it's very important that we in government also give defined outcomes, clear outcomes, and allow people to work from anywhere they want as long as they deliver. And therefore, new technologies will take place. You will have hundreds of new products coming out. Uh, Everybody will switch over, as you'll see, to smarter mobiles, and they will, in fact, bring in more and more technology. And therefore, we are in the midst of one of the biggest disruptions as far as new working styles are concerned. It'll be also the age of the gig economy. You will have a whole range of young people working in new areas, and these will be young people. And therefore, one of our challenges will be how do we provide better care for the gig workers of tomorrow, because startups will grow, they will expand, mobility will change, the way we work will change. There'll be a huge range of transformation will be undertaken, and we should all get ready and prepared for the new world of tomorrow as far as the workplaces are concerned.
So, do you foresee deep tech innovation being sparked?
I see huge innovation being sparked. We are ourselves, as I said, working on 7 groups who will bring in technology to disrupt. We will see a massive, massive transformation of use of technology in India. In fact, my view is that India will actually create many more stacks, like we've created the India stack. Using the Jam Trinity, we will have an agriculture stack, we'll have a health stack, we'll have many more stacks, and these will actually drive the growth of India and provide better support to the citizens of India.
But Mr. Kant, how do we prepare ourselves as workers, as young population, as people looking out for jobs?
So the first and foremost thing is that you have to be very, very skilled in a range of areas. Secondly, you have to be multidisciplinary. Thirdly, I think the nature of education will have to be changed totally. A lot of education, both in college and school, will have to be uh, digital. And therefore, there's a need for creation of top class content across India. And fourthly, I think the recipients of this learning process need to acquire different kinds of skills of tomorrow. We are in a changing world. We are in a world of, uh, you know, uh, the fourth industrial revolution, and everybody must be skilled for those technologies. It's not about just studying books anymore. It'll be a different world of tomorrow. And therefore, all of us, both in government and in the private sector, must transform ourselves for the emerging world of tomorrow.
We have to transform ourselves for the emerging world of tomorrow. But Mr. Kant, before I end this conversation, I keep asking this to a lot of experts I interview. How do you view the post-corona world?
Or the post-COVID world will be see a lot of structural reforms. And fortunately for us, the government in its packages has pushed for reforms, really pushed for reforms. These are sectors where India was dying for reforms, and these will bring in massive transformation. And I think the only way you can prepare yourself is by getting acclimatized to more of change and getting acclimatized to more and more of technology for tomorrow. And that technology alone can help you handle the post COVID world. But it's important that while we do this, we must keep ourselves mentally alert, physically fit, and intellectually invigorated. Must be at happiness with ourselves. Only if we are physically fit, if we are mentally rejuvenated and intellectually invigorated all the time, that we'll be able to handle the world of tomorrow.
Absolutely. That was a very important and a very thoughtful thought that you've given us, Mr. Kant. On that note, thank you so much for joining us in this era of social distancing through Skype. Thanks a lot for speaking Rajya Sabha Television, sir.
Thank you so much. Great pleasure speaking.